All right.
All right.
Here we go. Just a little bit of technical difficulty, but we're ready to do this. Episode 9. Welcome to The Harvest, Episode 9, where we discuss and talk about everything cinema and story. And as we grow, you grow. As we learn, you learn. I am Xavier Garcia.
And I'm Jonathan Garcia.
And today we're going to be talking about independent film funding. We're going to take a crack at this, and we're going to touch upon how to achieve award-worthy films on a budget, and how a Hollywood quality production does not necessarily need a Hollywood price tag. And we have a special guest with us. In case you haven't seen already behind us, we have Eric Monzon, whom is the behind-the-scenes juggernaut, I like to call him. He's the unseen third. You know, we might be the creatives, but he's certainly the brawn as far as financing and finances go. He's our line producer for the last couple of films, and he's going to be joining us today. Eric, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Yeah, man, it's great to have you. Eric, this is exciting for us because this talking about finances and funding a film is every filmmaker's greatest question. It's the biggest hurdle to jump over. And it's really exciting for us to be able to do this episode and kind of provide this as a resource for filmmakers that are going to be creating their own independent shorts and features, and just kind of they tap into the internet to find everything and anything they can in order to help them get funding. So we're excited to have you, Eric. If you could talk a little bit about your financial past.
All right. So I was a finance major in college. I've been in the industry. It was my first job in finance was in 2011. And I've been working ever since, in the financial services industry, really consulting and advising for large banks. Let's see. Obviously I studied finance in college, and had a big interest as well for film, and at some point early on had to make the decision whether to try to carry on a film minor or not. It didn't really work with my schedule to do so, but God had some different plans, and got me in touch with you guys, obviously through my brother in 2014, and it's been a great journey ever since.
Now you're a product of Notre Dame, and you studied finance there. However, prior to that, it isn't that film became something just spontaneously you thought about in college. I feel like storytelling has been something that's been a part of you since you were young.
Yeah. So when I was like a lot of folks in film. When I was young in middle school, high school, you'd have those projects in your English class, and you could either write the paper, or you could make the movie.
We've talked about those.
Even though the movie took 3 times as long, I always went the movie route. So I had a lot of really good, really fun films with me and my friends, and put some great stuff together. But yeah, it was more of a hobby, and it was a relatively newer thing too. I think at that time. Like iMovie was the big
editing software.
Big editing software. Yeah. So we would spend whenever we made our films, and then we would go to the computer lab and be editing on there, until the point where they kick us out, and then you'd have it running overnight, and then the next morning and find out that like somebody shut off the server overnight, and you have to redo everything. Run through all those troubles, but it was a lot of fun. It was definitely a hobby, and when I went to college, so I took 2 classes in college. They're kind of film related. One of them was the basics of film and television, which went through different major themes in cinema, and then at the end there TV, and then I took a multimedia course as an English course. Again, rather than writing the paper, I'd rather do the multimedia stuff, and similarly there, made some funny videos and for class, and I don't know how that was going to work, but
yeah, it's amazing.
That it was a great
Yeah,
passion.
it's awesome. I think middle school, high school, and even college is just an opportunity for us to to explore with the medium and to kind of find our space and our place in in the creative world. Jonathan actually brought this up, I think, in one of our podcasts past, in the fact that there's just in the film industry there's a space and a place for everyone.
Absolutely. There's a department for anything really. You look out into the world of business and you find it transitions perfectly well into the film industry. And Eric, being in the finance world, he really found his place in the film production within the line producing role.
Yeah.
And he's like, my two loves kind of thing, This is something I grew up
Numbers
with.
and story.
And then here's the finances, and it's like, why can't I just put those two things together?
It's interesting too because I think scientifically the numbers has been traditionally associated to a specific half hemisphere of the brain. It's like you've got the left brain that's kind of calculating things and very linear about it, and you've got your other half, and the right is kind of looking at things from a creative story perspective. And yet here with numbers, Eric has been able to find a way to kind of bridge the gap. The neuro bridge between the left and the right, where he takes numbers and numbers are telling the story. Because you know what? Interestingly enough, finances and the budget and the dollar has so much to do and such an influence in the story, and vice versa. And the story has an influence on the budget. And this is something that we on the podcast talk a lot about, as the fact that let the story navigate everything. Let the story navigate technology. Let the story navigate the funding. And if the story is too big for the funding, it's not like cut back on the story. It's find creative ways in order to make that happen. And I know that Eric has had to do a lot of that with us because our stories are never tamed down.
Oh, no.
They're always like, okay, now
Explode this thing.
Yeah, nor would I.
Yeah, it's like, okay, we need to blow up, an entire city, Eric. Can we fit that in the budget?
Can we burn a village? Can we do that?
Yeah, and so, but at the bottom line with that is that the script is so important, and having the script needs to be the first step before you're even thinking about money. And I know that right off the bat, like as you're writing, especially for you writers out there, you think about budget. You think about, okay, well, can this film that I'm writing, if it's going to be an independent film that's shot in Boston, can it be produced? Is the funding there? And you write with the dollar value in the back of your mind, but never in the front. And Eric, you being a line producer, your very first step in the whole filmmaking process and in the creative process and lending your expertise to the filmmaking process is the breaking down of a script. Can you talk to us a little bit? What is a script breakdown? What's its purpose? Well, like, where do you start? What's included in it?
Yeah. So obviously, you don't have a film unless you have, the money and the resources to be able to produce it. In order to be able to acquire that, you need some sort of investment or funding. And in order to secure that, you need really a budget. So it all starts with the budget. And so the script breakdown is it's a way to be able to produce that budget. And what I like to think of it, because again, I'm more come from the finance side than I do from the traditional Hollywood film industry side. So anytime we're working on projects here, I try to put it in terms of or think about it in terms of kind of the way I was taught in either product management or in finance. So a script breakdown, I would equate it to kind of like a bottoms up budget. So when you build a budget, you have different approaches to creating it. One is to come, as I say, top down. So you say, all right, these are the different areas that I'm going to have. Let's take a school, for example. You're going to have some money for your employees, some money for your cafeteria, some money for the building. So you think about all the different departments. In this case, film, you obviously have your film departments. And then a bottoms up budget is looking at the specific items, like specific line items that are needed, and really comparing that up and saying, okay, well, I need I need 1,000 desks, again going with that school example. I need 1,000 desks. I need 1,000 windows, whatever it is. And
you're building
really
a school.
Picking up all the different pieces and pulling them together. Right. So, so the same thing is with film. So you have a script breakdown, which is essentially taking a version of the script, breaking it down, and I like to break it down into people, places, and things. So the people being, the actors. You have your leads, your supporting actors, your featured extras, your extras, who are all mentioned in the script. You have your crew, who's supporting the production of the film. Then you have your places. So your places are really your locations of all your different sets, and then the sets themselves, and then the things. So the things can be wardrobe, it can be set dressing, it can be
props,
props, your equipment. So really, you have you can really go down a script, and some people will do it with different color markers. Other people will type it up in Excel. So whatever way is easier for you. I personally like to do it in Excel, because then you have a soft copy of it that then you can reuse it as or repurpose it as your prop list, as your location list. You have all sorts of facts and figures and metadata on the film, and we've used that even to go back to the script and say, hey, we had this actor, but that actor hasn't been featured in 50 pages. We need to move the scene around. So it can have a number of benefits, outside of just the analytical side. But yeah, at the end of the day, your script breakdown, it's really your tool. It's your bottoms up budget. You use it to compare against a more traditional top down budget, across all the different departments and the different phases of the film, to ultimately come up with your budget. Because as the budgets, when you go to try to sell a script or produce a film, you need that budget, and they categorize films in terms of budget. Even your rates for your actors, depend on the budget. So yeah, it's a super essential component to producing the film. And going back to what you said before, you need to have both sides of the brain working there.
Sure.
Both the number side as well as the creative side. And again, I wouldn't be able to do my job unless I had talented creatives like yourselves, giving me such great scripts. So.
Well, great, and it's funny. It makes me think of, sometimes there's someone we work with, Larry Devlin. Every time he looks at our scripts, he's like, "Oh yeah, no, this is too expensive. Oh yeah, no, this is not. You can't do this." Yeah. And I love him, because sometimes we have to hear that so that we can take it back and make some adjustments. But at the end of the day, one of the greatest things about Eric is that he'll take any of our scripts, and he literally, after reading it, is fully confident and is able to translate that perfectly. So important. Mathematically, right? And play it before us. Like, we could do this.
So important. It's so important to find yourself, and this goes back to some of our podcasts in the past, like finding a team of like-minded individuals that believe in the story, and they believe, and not just in the story, you guys believe in each other. It's like, the numbers may say no, but I believe in what you're trying to do, so we're going to find a way to say yes, and it's such a blessing for us, for, me and Jonathan, to be able to work, with like Eric, for example, who may look at the numbers and say, guys, this is impossible. It's impossible. It's impossible. Don't do it. But I know what you're trying to accomplish. So let's find a way to make it happen. Right. And oh gosh, that's like, for a director, that's like music to my ears. It's like, no, Xavier, New York, we can't melt New York City with a laser, but let's see what we can do, because I understand the importance of the story. Yeah. Right. Which brings me to the next point, because Eric, we approached you with Underground, and we said our goal, Jonathan and I, we had spoken about it, and we're like, we want to make this short film for $0, but there's no such thing as a $0 film, right? It just doesn't exist.
Yeah, no such thing.
Right. And so, having said that, we came at this story. We wrote this story. It's a 10-minute film. I think it was like an 8.5-page script, and there was a lot in there. There was a lot that we wanted to accomplish. There was, there's a little bit of action. A lot of it is very dramatic and dialogue heavy, because we understood that we were trying to do a $0 film, but we also, I think you famously say the fact that, there's the Hollywood model and yes, there's the independent model, but there's like the Garcia model where we don't just look at the dollar value. We also look at things like sweat equity, and we put a value on the preciousness of, individuals and what they bring and what they offer and the resources that they can bring to a film, their intelligence, their abilities, their, you name it, and that has a dollar value in it as well. And although you can't put zero down on that budget, there are some creative ways to applying your finances, to applying your dollar value. You don't have to just break things down and say, okay, actors this much, set this much. You apply the dollar to the need and where it is. And I want to talk a little bit about Underground, yes, but more importantly, any experiences and personal experiences with you, Eric, where you were like, okay, we don't have the dollar for that. This is what we can do creatively in order to make that happen. And, just kind of some maybe from a Blood Throne or from Underground, just some ideas that, you proposed in order to like make something that there was no money for happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and obviously, if you're gonna have, you're bringing in actors, you're bringing in crew, who are gonna be, they're gonna be a part of the project, and even if you're not able to compensate them, money, there are many other ways too that you can compensate someone for their time, and obviously for one, there's just the consideration within the film itself, the credits, so. But then, but obviously, you want to make sure too that they're, it's a good environment for them, that they're, one, obviously enjoying their time, on the film and getting something out of the film set. But then, meals,
that's a must.
And, the networking that they have with other actors, the, you'd be surprised how many people also, if they have resources, just they want to be able to see those resources being put to good use. So there are people who they've lent their home, they've lent their pets, they've lent their
their children,
babies,
their infants and toddlers.
And just being a part of it, is really big for everyone, and just obviously showing that everyone's valued. Because you wouldn't be able to produce the film unless you have, you have crew and resources for it. So I think that's something that you guys have been able to manage really well, and especially been able to. It's been recognized by your network of really friends through this process. And then specifically for Underground, when you guys first came to me with the script, and I think we were moving so quickly with the script and the budget and the all the resources, pulling it together. We're trying to shoot before the winter came down here in New Bedford, and you had really a lot of the pieces already there. Ahead of time.
Well, we had an amazing, executive producer. Arissa was an executive producer for it. Sherry Cowie was an executive producer for it. And that they brought so many resources of their own, themselves being very well connected and then being key pieces to the puzzle. I think for us, for Jonathan and myself, our biggest responsibility is providing an amazing story, and to that you can attach the parts. And I think people get excited about a great story well told, and they'll partner with you in order to tell that story. And that's kind of something that we're constantly preaching, is the importance of getting it right when you've got the time in pre-production and you're planning these things out and you've got the script. Take the time to fix it. Take the time, if you foresee any issues whatsoever, while you are reading the script in hand, to take the time when you have it, when it's the cheapest, to go through and fix the dialogue, fix the story reversals, get all those things right, because once you've got an excellent script, people will come and resources will come, and without that screenplay, which is essentially your blueprint for the film, there's not anything that you can really do. Sure, you can plan and anticipate, and you can come up with some ideas as to what you think it's going to be, but get that script right, because once that's nailed and solid, you're going to be able to look at it and say, this is what we need and this is what we don't need. And sometimes incorporating things that you don't need into a film costs you money. It costs you money.
Well, I remember, Xavier, I remember for Blood Throne, we were going over the budget, and I think we had what was probably Xavier's one of the hardest conversations he's ever had, where we literally went down the budget and we said, okay, here's our budget. Now we need to scale back.
I remember this.
And we just went line by line, and we said, all right, take out, let's say $1,000. Take out $1,000 from the script. Where does it come from? Where does it come from, right? And he took out, all right, you're going to take it from here. We're going to take.
I think we might have a slight internet issue. Yeah.
And going, and eventually we just kept going to the point where we said, now we don't even have a film. And that really helped, because it really prioritized where the funding was going to go, what was essential. It really challenged us in some ways to think, all right, maybe there's a cheaper option for the way that we were going about it. And until now, we haven't really thought about the cheaper option that would be, just as effective, in some cases maybe even more effective in telling the story. And I think you spoke about that in one of your previous podcasts, where you said, where there are limitations, that forces creativity. And obviously a budget is a big one for forcing you to really operate within the box of what you have.
Yeah, no, it's there are. You gotta, creativity is really what it comes down to. Here, for example, I've got a couple of numbers that I want to just read out. For any of you that saw the 2014 reboot of Annie, I think it starred Cameron Diaz and Jamie Foxx. This is how they broke down their film costs. So their cast was $17 million. Their rights, and to secure rights and for their writers, that was $8 million. Producers, that was $2.5 million. The director, $2.5 million. The production cost total $34 million, and post-production $9.5 million. Now, a size of the chunk for Annie came from acquiring the rights to the classic characters and the music. So, it's like, it's a hard knock life. That that cost them $4 million. And then they had to pay their two biggest stars, Cameron Diaz, which was 7.5, and then $5 million for Jamie Foxx, just for that 2014 remake. Most of the production and post-production costs fell somewhere between $1 to $2 million. And that's set construction, the dressing, operations, production staff, production sound, film, tape, editing. And then location expenses and transportation were some of the biggest production costs, interestingly enough. That was $4.5 million and $3.9 million, respectively. And then the film had, I think, a special effects budget of $850,000. Now, that's the Hollywood model, right? And that's spread across all of those areas. Now, when it comes to independent budgets, they're a little bit harder to pin down. They can be entirely self-funded, or it could be crowdfunded, or it could be backed up by investors. There are different ways to do it. We do it differently. I think for us, we found that the best way, especially when it comes to independent film, is to just, your own pocket. And there's this Hollywood saying, it's like
short films that we've that we've had. It's definitely going to be a lot easier when it is out of the pocket.
Yeah, out of your own pocket. Yeah. Now there's that Hollywood saying, it's like you don't fund your film with your own money. But goodness, think about the peace that you have when you've got full creative control. All of it rests on your shoulders as far as it's how it does and what you can do and how you can present it, what the team that you work with and all that.
Yeah, especially when it's proof of concept, and you're really trying to make sure that you have no limitations. and you want to get what you envisioned out so that it gets picked up, or so that's
and you can,
really,
at that point you can do a ton more.
Yeah.
You can do different things. I mean, I want to use an example. I don't know if you saw 2010's Tiny Furniture, and I want to use this example just because Lena Dunham and the way that she did this was really unique. Now, that feature film was $50,000. Tiny Furniture, and it was her breakout film. Now, she was an actress before that, and she was a writer, and then she wanted to direct and write something. So she wrote it, she directed it, and she starred in it along with her mom and her sister, and then a couple other friends. The whole film was shot on the Canon 7D. You know, I mean, does this sound familiar, right? It's like it's shot with the 7D. The film took place in Tribeca and Lower Manhattan, which is actually where she lives. So here she is using her resources, what she already has. The film was shot in November of 2009, and she said, Lena Dunham says that like she wrote a really tight script, and the actors were really faithful to it because again, it was a great story. Now, production costs, so like camera, equipment, actors, salary, crew, location, that's probably for independent films going to be about 50% or more, right? Post-production, so that's, your editing, your software, crew and whatnot, distribution, marketing, that'll make another 30% of the budget combined, depending, again, this is feature film, and depending on what your goal for it in the end is. And then your pre-production costs will probably make up the remainder. Now, the beauty of independent filmmaking is that your budget has way more flexibility. You can be a lot more flexible with it, because again, with Tiny Furniture, she used her mom, she used her sister, now if you do like what we did with Underground, we worked with professional SAG actors, and these are union actors that fell so in love with the story. And not just the story, but our goals behind it. And not just our goals behind it, we also had enough of a track record at that point that they saw that we put in our blood, sweat, and tears into it. And so there's as much of our sacrifice going into it as themselves when they, when they said, okay, guys, we'll defer our payment because we see that you guys are going to put your all into this and you're going to take this to being the greatest it can possibly be. You have that kind of a flexibility when, first and foremost, it's an independent film, obviously, but secondly, when the funding is coming out of those resources that you have control over.
Yeah, and that's very encouraging too to even think about for these professional actors that have been in Hollywood sets. They take a look at your script, they read it, and they said, "I will defer payment." That's very encouraging to know. Okay, they've fallen in love with the story because they know that on their end they've put an investment. They've invested their time, and they know that that's going to return to them as profit for portfolio work or for whatever they want to do. Maybe they want to pursue a different style of acting. They don't want to play the villain anymore. They want to play the good guy now. And, they see these things and they, I love this role. I want to pick it up.
Yeah. And, and again, Tiny Furniture had the luxury of it being a contemporary film set in, basically her home with her family and so forth and so on. But then we decided to do a blood throne. And a blood throne, for those of you that don't know or haven't seen a blood throne, takes place, in what was it, year 20 BCE. And so, just prior to, I think it was like a couple generations prior to the birth of Christ. And it was about the life of, King Herod, the Palestinian king, the Herodian dynasty, and just kind of like his descent into, insanity and what led him to going mad because of his anticipation of this prophesied Messiah that's to come. And so here we've got this biblical epic, right? This period piece that we are somehow independently trying to fund and make happen. Now, with a film like that, there are certain areas where you just have to apply the dollar to. There are some areas where you can be creative and not, but there are some that you have to. And I think our biggest hurdle for that was authenticity when it came to the set. And the majority of the money went to that. Eric, if you could talk a little bit about like the numbers and how we had to break it down for a Blood Throne, because that's very different than Underground. And even though Underground is still a period piece, Underground... a lot of those period pieces are still in existence today.
Right, museums and stuff.
So we were able to use museums. We were able to use, just kind of some of these historical sites and not have to pay in order to create them, but not with a Blood Throne. We had to build that set from scratch. If you could talk a little bit about that experience and kind of allocating the budget for something like that.
Yeah, and also I think we learned a lot too from creating the budget from a Blood Throne, and applied those lessons learned into Underground. So as you mentioned, building the set was something that took it took a lot of supplies. Obviously, you needed this someone with the right skill to be able to pull that together. And then obviously to make it look authentic, and then the time, because we were building it within a space, so we didn't have access to that space, indefinitely. So there are a lot of limitations there, that naturally, you are going to take a trade off of people or money or skill, and at the end of the day, was pulled off. The whole film, I believe the budget for the whole film was about $37,000. For Blood Throne, which was by all measures, pretty remarkable for a period piece, a 40-minute period piece, that ended up, you asked about the numbers. So some of the numbers I like are, the 4 wins and the 9 film festivals and the 13 nominations and so forth. So it obviously did really well in film festivals. But yeah. At the end of the day, I think we took a lot of those lessons learned, one being, VFX, and where we weren't able to obviously film Israel or we're able to film Israel in New Hampshire.
Go figure.
In the middle of April. But we used that with the help of blue screens and green screens. And when it came to Underground, that was a priority, is to let's try to minimize the use of blue screens and green screens, which ultimately we did. It looks great, but for instance, the opening scene that takes place in that museum, that probably saved us so much, just because the look and the feel of the set was obviously of that time, and it's a little easier to find that in colonial New England than it is to find ancient Israel in this part of the world.
You mentioned the blue screen and green screen. I want to quickly say something. We also talked about this before. When you're limited with budget, you have to find new resources. But not only do new things appear on set, new ideas, new creative ways to tell the story, but it also launches new ventures. Just like Star Wars had to launch ILM. They didn't
ILM
have
was
that
born
before.
Because of that.
For us was the same exact thing. For Blood Throne, we had to launch HIM VFX Group, and so we had a team of artists from around the world that
literally from around the world
that were invested into this project, and we came together and we created a VFX group because of it. So finances plays a lot of roles, whether a lack of finances or abundance of finances. It could really bring to life many things that you never expected.
Well, what do they say, like need is the mother of
and things move so quickly too in a film. Things move so quickly, or with any major project that has a big budget and obviously a lot of stakeholders. Things move so quickly, and your ability to be able to, as you say, plan ahead. You talk to anybody who's in the military, what do they talk about? Planning. I mean, they're amazing at that. And it's so important. And the more you plan, the more ready you are for with what you're expecting to happen, or if things don't go to plan, all right, now you have some alternatives, some ideas on how to do things other ways. But yeah, when it comes time to budgeting and improvising like that, having a plan, as opposed to just saying, okay, here's $5 million, you take $1 million, you take $1 million, you take $1 million, and then let's just bring it all together. It's like, no, actually knowing where every dollar goes. You only do that through prep. And you can do that to, you can be as precise as possible. And, obviously you need to have some flexibility there, and some buffers and wiggle room to expect the unexpected. but it's a balance.
It's got to be super well planned, and this is something we talk a lot about on this podcast. It's just the importance of being well planned. It's actually funny. So today we are airing the episode 8 as we speak. So we record on Tuesdays and we also release on Tuesdays. And this past Tuesday we did a virtual roundtable discussion with all of the actors from Underground. And one of the actors, Damien Chinapi, he actually said something really interesting as far as his experiences of working with Mount Harvest. And the first thing he says is, the question is, what's your experience working with Mount Harvest? What was that like? And he says, they run their sets like the military. Everything is planned. And and that was exciting to us, because it goes, okay, cool. He felt like everything was accounted for. There was leadership that was present. He knew that things were being taken care of. Everybody was doing their job. And that's a huge mantra here in New England. We've got, Bill Belichick and the Patriots, do your job. We kind of carry that into our film sets. Everybody's doing their job. But you can't expect something like that from volunteers without excellent planning. Excellent planning is so important. Having it all down on paper, not just in the mind of the director or the producer, but having it down on paper, having it organized and distributed so everybody is on the same page, literally. Everyone, look at page 1. Let's talk this through together. Let's discuss, the pros, the cons, the pitfalls, and the successes, and going through bit by bit, rehearsing, looking at the script and planning. And I mean rehearsing not just for the actors, but rehearsing for the crew as well, rehearsing the execution. I know that Jonathan and I, we take painstaking notes on the blocking and all of our top downs and our camera moves. All of that stuff is pre-planned. And when you work with volunteers, you kind of, I don't want to call it OCD. It's not. It's just like you kind of have to have that real detailed minutia type mentality to it, because it creates confidence. And people are like, okay, everything's spelled out.
Xavier, you talk about we talked earlier about the script breakdown. You said people, places, and things. There's a volunteer element as well to the places piece to that. We were filming underground in a public place with a very limited amount of time. Like you didn't have time to mess up, really.
Right.
That would be so costly. You say burning daylight, like you're literally burning your amount of time to film in these locations. And so that planning, that prep, there's a time is money. So there's a major time component to it. And I always tell Xavier and Jonathan, I say, I can't just take over the budget. I also got to take over the schedule at the same time, and we've got to manage cost, time, and quality. And you're managing all three of those things. Making sure that you're not sacrificing the quality, but those come at the expense of either costs, money, or time, just the cost in itself.
And, going back to, and I know we kind of, not to beat a dead horse, but we always bring up the point of, the script, the story being excellent and how it's being presented being excellent. And just to kind of give a mini example of how that worked out in our favor with A Blood Throne, one of the scenes that ended up unfortunately being cut from the film, but, it made it in there just a little bit at the beginning, a little bit through a flashback, but you see the scene of Herod, strangling one of his sons, which is, a historical event. And that needed to take place in a prison in his Masada palace. And as we were kind of shopping around the idea and doing our research and doing our homework and planning and going through and looking for locations that would settle what we wanted visually, we found this private prison that, belonged to an architect. And, and I'm not going to give names and locations and whatnot because they want to remain private. But this place, the person wasn't really interested in the story that necessarily we wanted to tell, but he was uniquely interested in who the protagonist, depends on how you want to look at the film, was, and how we were telling his story and how we were highlighting certain elements of him by creating the set, in his house, and him being an architect and him looking at our plans. He was like, wow, you guys are going to build this and you guys are going to go and tell this person's story, because something that is little known about Herod, and that is kind of his at least his only positive mark in history is the fact that he was a world-renowned architect, and he built the temple in Jerusalem, or the second temple after it was destroyed by Solomon's temple was destroyed. He builds the second temple, and it's a marvel, and it's beautiful. And this really excited the architect because he saw our plans, he saw how we were going to execute, and he was like, "You guys aren't architects, but you've architecturally built the Masada temple." And so he got excited about the plans and was like, "You can use my prison that I own, this private property that I have, for free," because he saw the planning. And and again, that's a testament to how important planning is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. And one of the cool things was his home was beautiful.
Oh yeah, and he's an architect.
There was another part of our set was in his home, but we didn't feel comfortable.
Yeah, we wanted to ask him for his house.
It's just it's so great when you find that stuff. It's probably such a rest to you, Eric, when you're like, oh, we found a set instead of building a set. It really softens up the budget.
Yeah. Now, moving on to a new topic, just people equaling money. That's something that we mentioned briefly, but I kind of want to unpack a little bit more because there's so much gold in the individuals that you are working with, and I think communication is a key component to that, because without articulating and communicating the needs of the film, you're not able to find Atlee has a Karuka, things like that, and Eric, if you can, I think that specific piece there applies really to you, and just kind of how that comes about, and using the resources of people as a budget component.
Yeah. So the statement "people are equal to money" is, I think, maybe a little too brute, but
sure.
Yeah, people's time definitely is equal to it's equal to money, and at the end of the day, you look at any product, you look at any service that's adding value to somebody else, and there's there's a strong correlation, obviously, between the amount of time that's dedicated, and whether it be the number of people or the amount of time that a specific person is spending on it, to its market value, let's say, to what it's bought and sold for, to use some finance terms. In this case, when you are working with a limited budget, or even when you're working with any type of budget, and you're looking for areas to cut costs, there may be other ways that you can get something, or borrow something, or repurpose something from someone else, or use their talents to some degree. And I think Atlee's example is amazing. We had built in the script the idea of a Karuka crashing, and for those who don't know, a Karuka it's essentially an ancient ancient carriage, and horse-drawn carriage, and so think like Oregon Trail type thing, and these are pretty fancy, and the one that we were planning to use in the film, since it was belonging to a Roman governor, obviously needed to look pretty fancy. And we were looking on eBay, we were looking everywhere to try to see
eBay Karukas. How much do they go for?
Yeah. And I think at one point, Xavier, I think I sent you a picture from a museum in Chicago. I was like, man, maybe we could get that over here. But it just so happened that that one of the actors, his I believe his father-in-law, had in his barn just an old carriage, and it had come to us, after we humbly went to our team and said, hey, look, these are our needs. This is what we're trying to find. He said, hey, I think I have something that may be able to work. And we modified this, this old, I don't even know what it was, like an old wagon that was basically had the base of the carriage. In a couple of days, Atlee basically built this whole thing, and we
during production too.
Yeah, right.
Good. Yeah, during production. Which obviously wouldn't be ideal, but that's
right.
what we had, and but it worked. And and the other, the alternatives would be obviously to cut the scene, to have to build something from scratch, to go to eBay. So when it comes to any item, this would obviously show up on the prop list of the script breakdown. We would look at the list and we would say, okay, is this something that we own? We could pick up. So like whether it's like a rock or a stick, that you can easily just pick up on the side of the road. You own it. Somebody owns it that you can borrow it from. You can rent it, or you can buy it or build it. So you have many different options there. And then the worst case scenario is you cut it. You cut it from the film. So as kind of a later step of that breakdown, it's going through all your props and going through all the things that you need, and saying, okay, which of these, at the end of the day, you can always build something. It's just a matter of how long is it going to take you to build it. So if it's not reasonable for you to be able to build it, or to acquire all the tools to be able to build it, or it's so expensive that you're not going to be able to rent it or buy it, then you need to look at the other alternatives. But your first choice should always be go into the things that cost the least, or take the least amount of time.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, time is money. And I think that's something that oftentimes filmmakers forget, that if you're able to look at time, with a dollar figure on it, give yourself the time necessary in order to, okay, you can't buy the Karuka, but maybe you can make this thing. Maybe you have somebody skilled with woodworking, or yourself, and take the time then to put this stuff together. Now, we didn't have time. We didn't have money. This was more kind of miraculous last minute. And that was a testament to the organization and the fact that we were open, and a lot of communication was being had between cast, between crew, between, directors and producers, and so forth and so on. And I can't stress the importance of that for you filmmakers out there, to, having everything documented, having everything organized, and sharing this stuff. Google Docs is awesome. I think Google Docs has become kind of our best friend throughout the filmmaking process. That right there in and of itself is a creator's tip. Use Google Docs and the capabilities that it has for you to be able to share this stuff, just kind of blast it out to your team and get everyone organized, whether it's Google Sheets, Google Slides, Google Docs in and of itself, and taking advantage of those tools, because we use that a lot in order to communicate with the team, but not just through words, but even through pictures and visuals, sharing kind of the process, sharing the needs, as you eloquently put, like kind of humbly talking to the cast and saying, okay, this is the goal for this scene, and this is where we have yet to meet all of the needs, who knows what, who can do and provide what, and giving yourself enough time to accomplish those things is the equivalent to giving yourself enough dollars to just pay for it and buy it.
And I want to build on that for a second, because if you have, let's say you have a Hollywood crew, you would have somebody who's in charge of, let's say, the department of props. So you would need, obviously as the director, you want to be able to communicate that vision, or as the art director, communicating that vision of, all right, this is what I want my set to look like. This is what, this is I need a Karuka. But there may be some out there that we're going to go out there and they're going to buy 5 Karukas, and they're going to say, all right, I'm going to spend my money on 5 of them. You tell me which one you think is best. And obviously with where we are, that we don't have the luxury of being able to buy 5 Karukas out there, so that's why it's so important. And using these shared, resources, these cloud resources are, have made the job so much easier in terms of communicating vision to the rest of the team. As the set grows, that then does become, our props. We've gotten a ton of compliments on the costumes and props. Peter Brugier, who's fantastic at coming up with these props and acquiring these, and he knows the look and feel that you're going for in the film. And, he's been able to do it successfully in the last 2 films with 2 completely different time periods.
And that's the importance behind that, is really kind of taking note of the people that you're surrounded with, film project to film project, because like I said, people are going to be a resource, for that project moving forward, and just kind of creating a Rolodex, if you will, of these individuals that were instrumental in your past projects are going to be people perhaps that are going to be involved and help in the future projects. Like you said, you just brought up Peter and his business, and he does a lot of reenactments, and he has access to a lot of prop houses for a lot of his personal work. And when we kind of serendipitously came across what he did, he was just amazing for a Blood Throne, but then he became a central piece and a central figure for the creation of Underground, and got to have a bit role in the project as well. And and I think that's awesome. It's like, hey, talking about rewards, and rewarding individuals, like he actually had a genuine excitement on set and being able to be a part of it. And he's like, that was all worth it. It was worth it just to have that time, and we had fun.
Yeah. Eric, I wanted to quickly you to touch on this particular point. I don't know how much time we have left, but something that you've been teaching me on the side. I mentioned this about stocks, and I think it was one of the episodes where I mentioned it, where I've kind of gotten into it during the coronavirus time. Yeah. But one of the things that you taught me and kind of sent me research on was about portfolio theory, and understanding risks, and understanding what to get involved in and what not to get involved in. When it comes to film production, one of the things that you as a line producer, you have to balance out, is it worth the time? Is it worth the money to get this or to get that, to get involved in this, to use this location? How do you manage risk when it comes to certain elements on set? What is your process that you use to try to figure out, whether this is worth it or not?
Awesome question.
Yeah, no, great question. So finance and financing, it's defined by allocating needs and resources to who needs it and what. People always think that it has to do with investing, and that's a component to it, but really it's about getting resources out to the needs for the people who need to use or consume those resources at the right time, at the optimal time. So you'll hear me, I always tell you this all the time, it's not about how much, it's about when. So there's a time element to it. And when you think about the phases of a film, film production, where you have, the R&D, which is where you're coming up with the concept,
research and development,
and doing research. Then you have your pre-production. So this is kind of after you got your script and you're getting everything ready to be able to, start hitting record. Then you have your principal photography, which is the actual time on set. You have your post-production, which is coming back to the lab, piecing it all together, adding your music, adding your, color correcting, all that stuff. And then there's the, the distribution end of it, which is getting that out to, whether it be a movie theater, film festivals, video on demand, basically, getting then your obviously your return on your film. So you need to look at your film in terms of the whole life cycle of the film, and making sure that you have your needs for when you need them. So one thing we've done is, we've set a budget and said, all right, this is when we want to get our film done by. This is the budget for what we need in order to get it done, let's say for principal photography, or before pre-production, these are pre-production costs, and really having an idea of how much all that is. And then going back to your point about knowing the risks and knowing the returns. At the end of the day, it all comes down to the quality of the film. So, we don't want to sacrifice, let's just say a film that, you don't have backgrounds for.
Or cut out a scene for. Because,
cut scenes that you don't want to be put in a situation then, similar to like when you're trading, you don't want to be put in a situation where you're forced to sacrifice when you don't need to sacrifice. And so part of that is just by having reserves on board, having buffers on board, have an idea of what your costs are going to be, have an idea of when you're going to need to spend your costs, and then understanding the trade-offs. So we could have some great scene, where we're using practical effects, but it's going to require a lot of hands, or we're going to have to, do some, do some work in post-production, which, depending on the shot, may be more expensive or less expensive than what's there. But when I'm on set, usually it comes down to quality, because you're really trying to preserve as much as possible the best shots that you have. So being able to turn that around when you're on set, and then everything beforehand is about being as prepared as possible for that. Everything after the fact is, really putting together the best story with the tools that you have. But yeah, risk and return, that's something that you're always looking at. Do we need this scene? That's something that we ask all the time. Yeah, you could have a scene where you have, people at a baseball game, but that you're gonna have to have, again, people's time is equal to money. You're gonna have to have 30,000 people in the stadium to do that. So how are you gonna get 30,000 people that show up in a stadium? Instead, you can get a section where you have 1,000 people. Maybe you do some different shots. It's just a lot of people. That's a lot of people and a lot of people's time at the end of the day. And you look at these films. We had an intern in the office last summer who put together a great analysis of the correlation between budgets and then all these different factors. And the one with like the highest correlation, I think it was over 80% or 90% correlation, was the number of crew. And where you have a huge amount of crew, logically that's a lot of people's time, so that's a lot of money. And those are the films that were in the hundreds of millions, requiring thousands of people, versus other films with a $5 million budget that had a couple hundred.
Yeah, and we'll put that in the show notes, by the way, because that's an awesome resource. We'll put that in the show notes so that you can kind of see the correlation between all of those individuals. But yeah, sorry, keep going, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, so as something, again, I come from more of a traditional finance banking, background. Was obviously introduced into film, through church, through theater, through the Garcia brothers. But every time we do this, we see, all right, maybe there's a better way to do this, or maybe there's more resources that we find out about. And one of the things that we were looking at last summer was, all right, let's take the time to understand this industry better. Let's understand what are the big drivers to a film's budget, and what's within our control and what's not within our control. And what are the areas that we're going to want to possibly sacrifice in, or need to sacrifice in order to get our film, to be profitable. Because even if you are a Hollywood film, you blow out the budget for a Hollywood film, it's never going to get approved. So regardless if you have $100 million budget or not. So these are the things we look at. I mean, we say, step one, write the script. Step two, view the breakdown. And then step three, you're really looking at all the different components to your budget and saying, all right, where can we trim the fat?
So go ahead, John.
No, I'm saying all these questions, the probability of you going into a set and executing it 100% flawlessly like you envisioned when you went in is very low.
Yeah.
I remember being on the underground, and all of a sudden it's raining, and all of a sudden it's snowing, and we're like, we're in the Middle East. Why is it snowing? And so it's so.
Oh yeah, with the blood throne.
Right, with the blood throne. It's like, how do you manage that? Well, and you as a numbers guy start figuring out, well, now time is being taken away from us. We're starting at a later time. People are now need to get fed at a later time. So there's so many things that enter in that now you have to. I mean, it's a lot of a weight on your shoulder as a line producer. But if you love numbers, it becomes fun, because
numbers and puzzles.
You're starting to put these puzzle pieces together, and you're like, I got it. Let's move forward with this.
Yeah. So if I were to give an advice to you independent filmmakers out there that are, either just starting, or you're doing shorts and you're looking to do a feature, or you've done your first feature and you're looking to do your next one, my biggest advice is find yourself a great line producer.
Yeah.
Find yourself a friend that loves numbers and loves puzzles and loves story, and you can rely on to help you from a creative perspective be able to tell the best possible story with the assets that you have available to you. That would be my tip for filmmakers. I'm going to ask Jonathan, I'm going to ask Eric, if you guys had one tip that you could give, a financial tip that would help someone else, because that's the number one question. Whenever you are searching through film blogs, and I'm a part of a couple Facebook film groups, and everybody's always asking on there, it's like, hey, how did you come across your funding? How did you get the money? If you had to give someone some sort of a tip in order for them to be able to tell their best story, Jonathan, start with you. What would you do?
I kind of touched on it a little bit. Nothing ever goes perfectly on set. Having plan B, plan C, plan D when it comes to the money. When it comes to money, not just creatively thinking about my camera shut down, I ran out of battery, have a second battery. No, I'm talking about if so-and-so doesn't arrive on set, how does that affect you financially? If the camera malfunctions, how does that affect you financially? Kind of having the process of, thinking about it in money's term, not just leaving that on the line producer, but you as a DP, how does that affect you financially? Because then you can start thinking, what other elements you can use. Well, I can actually use this camera. Yeah. I can use this lens. I can shoot this way, because it's not just creatively you don't just see things creatively. You have to think things
absolutely.
with money. So having a plan B with a financial perspective.
Awesome. Eric?
Yeah, I guess my tip will be very very tactical, very practical. I think we touched on the script breakdown, its purpose, and the fact that it's an input into the budget. I will save a lot of independent filmmakers a lot of time right now and say that it is near impossible to find a Hollywood script out there. There is one that's out there. It's from the 2004 M. Night Shyamalan film called The Village, where it was leaked. You can search for it on the internet. It's about 70-something page breakdown, I believe, of the film budget with all the line items there. And they give you an insight, at least in 2004, what are the different line items on a film. You compare that to, let's say, IMDb, the credits, the different departments within IMDb. That helps you, break up kind of your above the line, below the line, post production, and other costs by departments. Then you also have, your SAG rates for actors, extras, stunts, animals, and so forth. And then finally using, something we use in finance when we're dealing with like intercompany costs, and looking at how much does one part of a company charge another part of a company for their service. So we look at things like from a cost basis, or what's called the cost plus basis, which is your cost plus a certain percentage of premium above what the costs are. And you can use these different methods to itemize the different items on your film budget. But these are some resources that I've used and had to come up with some creative ways for pulling that together.
Love it. Well, this is it. So for this last, now that we're on the subject of tips, this last section we're going to talk about Creative's Tip of the Week. Okay. Creator's Tip of the Week. I don't know if I stole yours from you, Eric. I don't know if that was yours, because I kind of jumped the gun on tips. But Jonathan, do you have a Creator's Tip of the Week?
Yeah. So on Underground, one of the things that is exciting as you're scouting, you have to think about what are the things that you think about when you're scouting, or what are the things that you need when you're scouting. Mm-hmm. You think about a DSLR. You need that. Take photos. But one of the things that I have certain apps on my phone. So let's say you don't have a DSLR, you use your phone. What are the apps that I use? A few of the things that I need to find out and figure out when I go scouting is, number one, as a tool, you want to use a 360 camera. A lot of people don't know that when you go on there, you don't just take photos of shots, angles, but having just plop in a 360 camera, getting every single thing in the room, later on you're able to go into your computer. When you forgot something, you can go in, zoom around the room, and scan and pan around. That's a really good tool. Also knowing sun location, where it's coming from, weather, if you're shooting outside, if it's going to be cloudy, that's one of the best things that you need for control of light. So here I got a few apps in here. Having a focus chart, look that up on Google, on your iPhone apps. Lumos is the sun, knowing the trajectory of the sun, where it's coming or where it's going. Having a shot designer, which is another app that we use for top downs, and knowing where to put the camera, where to put the actors, where the props are in. Have close-ups, which is basically an app of showing me a glossary of everything film. Someone says 180 shot, and they don't understand what it is, and you can explain it to them through the glossary, or they can have that so that when someone says to him, don't break that 180, then they'll know what it is. You'll scroll through that glossary and you'll know all your terms. So those are the apps. I'll say them again. We got Close-Up, Lumos, Focus Chart, and Shot Designer, along with a 360 camera that'll help you, look at your spot. Getting also photos of walls, materials,
textures.
Light, textures. Yeah. You never know if you want to present that stuff to the VFX artist. We lost Eric, but he'll be back. And so we'll be able to get everything that you need.
Yeah. It's actually all of those that Jonathan just mentioned will be put at the bottom of the YouTube page in the show notes so that you can see kind of the names of the apps and whatnot, because all that stuff is super useful. I know that a lot of the times, for example, in some of our scouting, like for Underground, you did all of the 360 shots of the alley of Rose Alley, and that was so helpful for the HIM VFX group to be able to then recreate the textures, recreate the cobblestone, and kind of set extensions. And because of those apps, we were able to kind of go in and really recreate a true set extension that kind of worked with the space, and it didn't look jarring to the eye. So that stuff is super helpful. Now, my creator's tip of the week. So I believe this is recent. As of April 25th, Roger Deakins started a podcast. Now, for those of you that don't know who Roger Deakins is, he's considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest, cinematographer DP, along with Emmanuel Lubezki. Yeah. But Roger Deakins is kind of like, he's the man, the Deeks. And he started a podcast. And he's already released, I mean, about 6 or 7 of them, maybe more at this point. I haven't checked up recently, but he's literally, I guess, he's awesome. He, as far as his communication with the film community, he does a lot of just answering questions, and he found that he was just answering the same question a lot of times. And he's like, well, we're all quarantined. Honey, him and his wife, they're like, let's just start a podcast. Awesome. And so they started a podcast, and they're going through just, kind of answering a lot of the questions that are asked of him. For those of you that, that, for example, I don't know if you got caught 1917 that just came out. There was a ton of really wild cinematography tricks that he ended up having to employ in order to create the one seamless shot effect for that movie. And he talks about that stuff, and he just kind of gives you a master's class in DP, and cinematography, lighting, his approach and his philosophies to it. This is like gold, okay? Cool. This is gold. He's literally just opening up his brain to you and pouring out his all of the years of knowledge that he's collected over the course of his career, his amazing career. Awesome. So check that out. I think the name of the podcast is the Team Deakins Podcast.
And where do you...
I believe it's on Apple Podcast. I'm gonna have to. Yeah, it's on the Apple Podcast website. I'm not sure if it's on Spotify. I listen to it through Apple Podcast and Team Deakins Podcast. So it's already got like raving reviews.
Sure.
You don't have to listen to it. People are on there giving it 5 stars. So the Team Deakins Podcast. Awesome. I'll put that in the show notes. Eric, do you have a creator's tip of the week?
Yeah. So I would say, the role of your line producer, really a lot of your work is, pre-production and post-production. But within principal photography, other than making sure that you're procuring all of the needs of the film, when you're actually shooting, there's a quality piece there that that really the line producer should take. And so things like continuity can be so costly. What I mean by that is, if you have actors and you're taking multiple takes, you want to be able to use all of those. And you need to understand that's on you. That's your responsibility. You're managing the budget, and having discontinuity in your takes is going to limit you in terms of which takes you're going to be able to even use on set. So making sure that you see your role beyond just being the budget guy or the schedule guy, but also being the quality guy, and making sure that you're being a quality individual on the set. That's corny there, but
important.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You gotta use everything.
No, I love it. Thank you so much, Eric. We appreciate having you on today's episode. And thank you all for joining The Harvest. Special thanks to our producer, Alana Dispena. Soon she's going to be putting up all of the transcripts for the show up on the Mount Harvest website. That's just around the corner. I know we keep promising it. We're just having some minor technical difficulties, and unfortunately, quarantine doesn't make things easier. But that will be up soon. Now, if you enjoyed what you listened to and you'd love to support the Harvest podcast, we do have a Patreon page, which is now actually being populated. I know that someone had mentioned, hey, the Patreon page hasn't been fully set up. It is now. Just there was some stuff on there that hadn't been launched or made public yet, but it is now going up. It is organized, and you are able to go on there. It's patreon.com/The Harvest Podcast. If you do want to throw us a couple bucks because you love what you're hearing and you're thinking, I want to support this, I want these guys to keep doing it, then we're more than happy to accept it, especially today talking about finances. It's an appropriate plug there. For any questions that you have, you can reach me on Twitter at xgarcia.
And at Jonathan Harvest.
At Jonathan Harvest. Eric, do you use Twitter, or are you more of an IG kind of guy?
More Instagram, but Monzon, or sorry. Yeah, I believe it's
Monzon 14. Awesome. And I'll put that also at the bottom of the show notes. Guys, thank you so very much. For any longer questions that you may have, if you want to ask any questions of the show and you want us to address them during one of the shows, we'd love to be able to do that. Hit us up, info@mountharvest.com, and we'll answer any questions that you may have. And that is all the time we have. Thank you guys so very much. We really appreciate you tuning in. We hope you enjoyed. And until next week.
Yeah, please like, share, and subscribe.
Thank you.
Awesome.